And welcome back, friends, trolls, and everyone in between. This is Star Spangled Eggs coming back for the final day, third day review of PAX East 2013, and more specifically, Injustice Gods Among Us and what information was shared there. So, for day three, really what they covered today for the most part was just a lot of the questions that I actually had leading up after days one and days two. You know, how I mentioned they didn't actually talk about the clash system and a couple different things. They actually went ahead and almost seemed to take all the questions I had leading up, well, at least most of them, and wrap it all up in this one little post. So I'm going to go ahead and dive on into what we got revealed to us at this time. So let's go ahead and get started with the fun facts. So, fun fact number one, Injustice Gods Among Us has actually been in development for over 2.5 years. So that's why we haven't seen any like Mortal Kombat 10 or anything like that out of NetherRealms, because they've been working really hard and really diligently on this project. So I think it's really great that they put forth all that time and effort, and I hope that the payoff is really good as well. And it looks to be so far. I like, actually, just on a side note, I actually do. One of the things that I really like about this game is that it is not ashamed to show off its gameplay. It's not ashamed to, show off their progress and keep us updated with things like that. I think that's a mark of confidence within the company that their product is good. You know, for instance, the Walking Dead game that just released was actually a real bomb. And some few fans and a couple of my customers actually liked it, but for the most part, a lot of people hated it. It got pretty bad reviews all across the board. And what was the one thing that actually talked me out of getting it, despite the fact that everybody else was confused, like, oh, it's The Walking Dead, how can they mess it up? But they didn't show practically anything about the game, and the price point was low also. So I think a game that has the confidence to show forth its gameplay is probably going to have good things coming to it. So definitely keep that in mind when you see all these other new games, especially for the next generation console coming out. Take it from a guy who works with games all day, every day. If they're confident in what they're selling to you, if they don't mind to show it off to you guys, then you know that it's a good product. All right, back on track. Fun fact number two. No obligatory characters will have to be unlocked. All the cast members are going to be present straight out of the box of the game. And one of those actually that they just showed in the stream, you'll be able to see him, is Black Adam. He's been confirmed as a character, and you'll be able to see kind of a little bit of how he plays in this video. It's pretty neat. And also, I'm going to go ahead and put this up too. They just leaked a set of images that show possible artwork for Ares and Killer Frost, and here you go, take a look at it. Ares looks really powerful, so I'm quite intrigued to see more of him as time goes on, and we're able to see more and more of the game. Alright, next fact. Fun fact number three. Transition is actually the term used to describe knocking the opponent into another part of the arena through the little cinematic event. It's called the transition. That's its official name now, so I'm not going to try and call it a quick time event or a Dead or Alive 5 or anything like that. It's called the transition. And apparently, this is actually a new reveal too. Transition actually takes meter to use. I was unaware of that. I mean, I could see why they would do that because it is quite a powerful technique, and that would limit it so everybody's not just trying to push everyone into the corner to get the transition or whatever the case may be. And so that leads me to believe the little, for better lack of better words to say, the wimpy looking transition hits we've seen before, where they just kind of knock them over a little bit, are probably attempts that lacked the full amount of meter for the full effect. So it was probably just like, if you like charge a focus attack and let it go before level 1, it's kind of weak in comparison to what a fully charged focus attack can do. From Street Fighter 4, of course. And so the effect, of course, for the transition are in the corner, you get the transition, and then wall bounce from mid. So apparently that's going to cost the meter too, which is good because that is a good tool, as we've seen, to extend combos, and we wouldn't want it getting sort of exploited in a sense like that. So I think it's nice that they put a meter limit to it. And so the next fun fact is actually really interesting. There's a lot of controversy behind it right now, and I'll go ahead and give you my 2 cents, and I'll let you make of it what you will. But basically, the traditional system of rounds in a match has actually been replaced by having what is almost the equivalent of 2 health bars, in which after a health bar is depleted, there's like a momentary pause with some fierce looks and words from the combatants, and that pretty much signifies the end of a round. But the other part that you have to remember is that what this means is if you manage to nearly perfect your opponent round 1, you have 2 health bars to fall back on, which arguably you do in the traditional round system since you have to be KO'd twice. Health doesn't refill in between matches, and the victor will get to retain whatever leftover health they had as sort of an extra buffer that the opponent won't have. And usually during traditional rounds 2 and 3 in other fighting games, both characters' health is restored to full, and it basically resets the fight at the end of the round, granting a fresh chance for both sides to start at the next round also. But this new system doesn't really follow that. It's a lot more like Darkstalkers 3, if you've played that, where whatever damage you've cost the opponent before a loss will be the damage amount they retain for round 2. So instead of having to work against a fully refilled health bar, practically erasing all your effort up to that point, you're actually rewarded here by being able to pick up from where you left off almost. And this might even make matches more possible for the underdogs of matchups. Some say it's a good change, and then others don't think so, like I said. I think it's a neat system, and I don't mind the idea of it being this way. I basically see it as one continuous round of taking down two health bars. You're at equal ends, there's nothing really unfair. You're given the same amount of health, as far as I can see it. So it's all in equal health amounts from start to finish. And really, if you're good at fighting games and things like that, you won't need it to refill it. So it'll be nice and fair, and it'll hopefully make for some good hype, actually, in like tournament play. Alright, next little fun fact. The pig is apparently the most godly interactable in the game, and you will soon learn what I mean by that when you get your hands on the game. They didn't say exactly why, they showed sort of what one of its uses is, and it actually does seem pretty cool. It's on a little meat hook, and you can push it, and it's almost like a full screen projectile at certain areas, and it does some pretty decent damage, knocks the opponent over. And so they said there actually is most likely going to be some battling over the pig because it is a very useful tool. Alright, now we're getting to the sweetest stuff that I feel like they revealed here. So this is the stuff that you're going to hear a lot of detail on, not just the silly stuff. Alright, first, apparently both players... so this is actually really neat. Let me talk about this for a second. So, in most fighting games where stages don't matter, they usually just click random stage and then whatever stage pops up they fight in because they're all the same size roughly and it doesn't make that much of a difference in most fighting games. However, in a system like this, it does make a lot of difference because stages are highly impacted by the characters you pick and vice versa. So, the only fair way I thought to do that was just, well, if they ever do it in tournaments, they're just going to have to do random stages, and you're just going to have to train on every stage to kind of know how to play that stage matchup, which is a good practice, but they've actually also incorporated another way of doing it, and this is what they've come up with. So the game's actually going to do like a 50-50 random generator on which stage to decide on. So player 1 and player 2 will both get a vote, and you can go to whichever stage you want to go. And it's done using like a spinner animation similar to something you'd use to play Twister pretty much. And it picks the left or right stage option after a random amount of spinning, and that's the stage you get to play on. And then on top of picking a stage, should the spinner choose your vote, of course, you can also decide which section of the stage to start in. Because, most of the stages are like 2 to 4 arenas that can be traversed. And they all give you different tools and interactables to assist your gameplay. So if you're, better in the museum as opposed to out on the street, you probably want to start there and work from there. Or unless you want to save that to knock them into it. It's a pretty neat little mind game you got going on there. Alright, and then what it does is it makes it so that later in the game, when you learn the stages your characters thrive in and what stages they don't, it's going to be like a whole new level of counter picking will be introduced, and it'll be actually decided somewhat fairly through this means. And you know what? This goes to prove my thesis, and that thesis was the idea that in this game, knowing and training with characters will be equally important to knowing and training in stages, because they're both very heavily reliant upon one another. And I think this is actually a really revolutionizing development. And I hope to see great things come from this added level of depth to the game's strategy and mindset. The way it is now, because of this new system, rather than simply learning matchups with characters, you also have to do matchups with stages too. And I think this is ingenious because now unfavorable matchups won't be like a 70% loss ratio anymore. Instead, for instance, your character may have a bad matchup against Black Adam, but he might ultimately end up with the upper hand because he gets the stage he works best in. Of course, it still relies on the craftiness and skill of the players, as it always does and always will, but adding this factor into the common matchup bracket gives the game, in my mind, a ton more depth. Because now, rather than battles just being player 1 versus player 2, it's now player 1 versus player 2 on whatever stage, and whatever tools that incorporates, as opposed to prior games where stages weren't really much of a factor. And here's the thing about that though, is that you might be thinking initially, like I did, that this could become really unfair, and so I was afraid of that at first. But after thinking a little bit, my fears were actually alleviated. Let me tell you why. First, because most of the interactables and things within the stage are limited to a certain amount of uses, only being like a one time per match use or one time per couple seconds or whatever the case may be. Of course, this also varies depending on how your character interacts with each specific object, because some people destroy the object and some people just use it as a vaulting tool, of course. But for the most part, all around, the tools are going to be limited to a few times use. And even the ones with multiple usages have a respawn cooldown, if you will. So it will actually limit the object spamming anyway, so I'm not too worried about that. And then second, even if something does, this is a NetherRealms game. And what we learned from Mortal Kombat is that they've built their engine to be balanced and tweaked on the go without having to make a full patch and go through all that trouble and effort like a lot of other games do. So even if something does become a problem, we could be rest assured that a fix will be provided in decent time because they've built their internal infrastructure of their code to accommodate for those kinds of things, which is ingenious, and I hope more companies decide they want to follow suit with that. Of course, I don't know how hard that is to actually accomplish, but I think it's really great that they were able to do it. Alright, next thing. They've actually detailed a little bit of what super meter can really be used on because there's a lot of uses for it and some I didn't even know about. So let me go ahead and dive on into that. They could be used, of course, on supers, super meter, as well as EX moves, as you'd imagine, the moves that I guess give an extra buffer of an extra hit or an extra damage or some form of properties. Transitions, of course. A new one here is push blocking. If you don't know what that is, it's basically a way to push the opponent back a bit while blocking to give you some breathing room if you're getting pinned down by a relentless assault. I guess the best example is like Marvel vs. Capcom series. You see them blocking, and then you'll hear it say like advancing guard, and you'll see the opponent just magically get forced back like half the screen or whatever. And that basically just gives you a little breathing room to be able to react and actually fairly combat the rush down that you're being attacked with. So rather than it being like in Marvel vs. Capcom where you can advance guard at any moment, they're actually having a meter cost to it. But of course, I don't think that this game is going to be quite as ridiculously rushed down as Marvel vs. Capcom is. So it only makes sense. But it is a nice tool to have at your available asset, but it will cost some bars, so it's something to think about. Then Burst, which I suppose is a character power ability that grants some special properties to the user for a short time. Like when you've seen Flash slow down the opponent and the screen goes like the slightly yellow color, or when Superman gains the red aura around him, increasing his damage output. I'd imagine these buffs would be the burst that they're talking about, because having those things to be not on some form of limit, they would be overused, and I feel like it'd be really bad. Like, I mean, can you imagine fighting a whole match in a nearly constant state of slow motion because of the flash? I think it'd be a nightmare. Even though they didn't really go into a lot of detail on burst here, I think that's most likely what it is, and if not, I'll be sure to update you on what it really is. And I said at the beginning of this video they did detail the clash system, although I will note not to full detail. I really wish they would have spent some more time explaining it, but they really just sort of brushed over it in a little bit of detail. So let me tell you what I know. Clashes are basically a meter waging metagame within Injustice. Basically, both characters end up on opposite ends of the screen, and the camera zooms in on them, and they get to each say something intimidating, and then they run at each other, and clash hits, and then it sends out this huge shockwave. And depending on what button you press, you can wage a certain amount of meter that you're going to win the clash. There can be a winner and a loser in a clash, or sometimes there can also be a draw, actually, where nobody wins the clash. And they did note that you only get one clash per match to prevent imbalance and just sitting there watching clash battles for the whole match. But the reason why clashes are good, it works a little differently whether you're the instigator of the clash or the defending party. But for the instigator, the maximum reward for winning the clash, they said themselves actually is like a 33 to 35% life recovery. And that is insane at the sound. I don't know if I particularly like the taste of that, just hearing it straight up. I bet it probably has some balance to it, and it's probably rare to actually achieve within the game. And of course, that also means the risk has the same weight, but because you have to use a lot of the gained meter to bet on it, which means sacrificing future use of all the other meter-based tools I talked about before. Push blocking, EX moves, everything like that. So like I said, they actually didn't give a whole lot of detail as to what dictates a wager, what other buffs and benefits can be gained or lost in a clash, what the defendant's goal or gain in the system is. But I'll update you with what that is when they actually talk about it, because they only kind of brushed over it in passing a little bit, and that's all I know. Alright, my last notes here are actually some DLC notes. There were some questions about DLC that they answered. I know a lot of people have questions about it because they want to know, should I get the season pass? Should I, even bother with the DLC for this game? Let me tell you what they said. Some people asked if stages might someday be offered as DLC to the fans, and their response was sort of not really a yes or a no. It's basically said they are open to anything that we want. So if we show that we really want stage, if there's large outcry for stages, then they will put it in there for us. They'll find a way to do it if we're willing to, if we want it, we're willing to pay for it, of course. So just like pretty much every other company should roll, right? Alright, and then also the other thing they noted was there's a question asking if there would be other versions of the playable characters through downloadable content, through skins, for instance, a Robin skin for Nightwing and an Impulse skin for the Flash, and they have confirmed that 100% that that is in the making, in the plans. So we will see a Robin skin for Nightwing and things like that coming out pretty soon, and I think that's kind of neat. Even though they're not completely different characters, like I would have wished, I would have liked to see Robin and Nightwing be two playable characters. I think it's nice that they, give us that salute and they are able to incorporate even some more characters in there. They even said in this stream that one of their main focuses was to try and include as many of the villains and popular characters as they could, even if they couldn't get them within the fighting cast. So in closing, friends, trolls, and everything in between, this has been Star Spangled Eggs, keeping you updated as always. I love to talk about this stuff, and I'd love to hear you guys talk about it. If you have any questions or anything, I'm more than happy to try and find answers for you. And hopefully soon I'm going to be releasing a video kind of talking about a lot of people's objections I've been running into at work with Injustice and how I've been able to handle those and be able to get people a little less nervous and a little more excited for Injustice. I appreciate everybody who bothered to watch this far, and I hope it's been informative, and I hope this gets you excited for the game, because if you can't already tell, I'm super excited and I want everybody else to be too. So, alright, I'm signing off for the day. Have a great one, guys.